Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the afternoon seminar on the highways gap. One of the key issues facing UK right now, particularly England, as targets go up and as we have continuing challenges between planning and highways. My name is Nicholas Boy-Smith. I'm the founder and chair of Create Streets. Create Streets is a design practice, town builder and specialist urban think tank. I will come in again in precisely 1 hour and 14 minutes. We will get you back to your work day at 1:45. And I'm going to hand over to your chair, the MD of Create Streets, David Milner.
Thank you, Nicholas. Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome to today's session, Mind the Adoption Gap, on how to create beautiful places alongside, not against, highways. We've all seen the beautiful CGI renders and planning applications. We've got the leafy, walkable neighborhoods where children play, cars are disappeared away, taking a back seat. But then we've also seen what gets adopted when we have a sea of black asphalt. There's no trees, there's disjointed pavements, you've got wide curves, large visibility displays, all of which feels a world away from your original vision. And right now, the pressure's on. Most of you probably have had your housing targets doubled. The December NPPF updates mean that the rules of the game have changed. We're in an era now of vision-led planning, manual for streets, brackets coming soon, potential parking pavement bans locally. And the question now is, how do we stop planning and highways from being these two separate silos and start treating them as two sides of the same coin? For the webinar today, we won't solve everything, but we'll try and solve some bits and pieces. It's not just about abstract theory or nice to have design. We want to talk about the highway reality. So we've got a really good range of speakers who are going to be diving into the friction between planning consent, long-term maintenance, the asphalt versus block paving debate, if you like, and the technicalities of continuous footways, for example. We do want to move beyond one-off exemplar schemes and figure out how you raise the bar for every single street. How do we do this at scale? And to do that, we brought together speakers from Active Travel England. We've got speakers talking about Homes England projects, projects in Surrey and local authorities in Cheshire West and Chester. And we even have a perspective from France as well. So we all are hopefully hearing something we haven't heard before. For housekeeping and on our agenda, we've got 1 hour, 15 minutes. We're going to be super strict on timing. We've said that, and we will do it. We're going to have some rapid fire, and they will be quite quick case studies. So I'm sure you'll sort of see which ones you enjoy, and then hopefully dive in after the webinar to find out more. We will have a good 20 minutes of Q&A where I'm going to try and prioritize your questions, not what I want to ask. Please do use the chat function to drop in your questions. We'll sort of filter them out, try and pick out the best ones. We're not going to get to everyone, so apologies in advance. Right, that's enough for me. The first section on our agenda, better streets everywhere, talking about street design codes. We want to look at how to make better the baseline, not the exception. And we're going to look at some real world examples from Cheshire West and also from Surrey. Firstly, we're going to hear from Jack, who's going to be followed by Create Street's own Tom Noble. Over to Jack.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Let me get my slides up. Can you see that, David? Yeah, perfect. Wonderful. Okay. So as David said, I'm going to speak to you briefly around our design code and some of the context for the work we're doing there. My name is Jack Hubert-Mayhew, Principal Transport Planner within our Strategic Transport and Infrastructure team at Cheshire West and Chester Council. So first of all, the ambition, and I won't dwell on this long because we haven't got long, but like lots of councils, we've recently adopted our local transport plan, sets out a really ambitious vision around fairness, sustainability, improving economy, improving health, and importantly, boosting transport's contribution to place across our borough. Very much aligned with similar visions and principles that we see increasingly across local, regional, and now national policy as well. So the bar has been set high. That local transport plan, again, similar to many others, embeds a modal hierarchy principle as well. So we explicitly say we're going to prioritise transport modes which build a fairer and more sustainable transport system, prioritising people walking, wheeling, cycling, and then giving less priority to general motor traffic. So yeah, the bar is set high. There's then a gap, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So we know that high policy ambitions don't automatically translate into day-to-day design decisions. we're all coming from different perspectives. Planners, transport planners, developers, engineers, we all come to an issue with different professional lenses. And to some extent, implementation is the tricky bit. It's where we have to make those trade-offs and those difficult decisions. My experience is that sometimes those difficult decisions are left to people on the ground and the operational people who are doing scheme designs and implementation in a specific location. That's the point where people have particularly high workloads, where people feel they're taking on personal risk and liability about design decisions. And I think really what we recognize is that we need to take some of those tricky decisions up front, take it out of that scheme by scheme basis, and think about what do these policy objectives really mean in terms of clear, adoptable designs. And that is exactly what the design code seeks to do. What we're saying, in a sentence, if you want to achieve the LTP4 vision, build streets and places like this. It's a co-written and multidisciplinary code, and we've gone through quite extensive public and stakeholder engagement to build it as well. The 8 boxes you see there are the kind of chapter headings, all of which will be familiar to many of you, I'm sure. But really importantly, this isn't just about transport, it's not just about movement. It also integrates some of those more traditional planning functions, points around built form, identity, making sure that everyone's pulling in the same direction. And we're going to append further technical details and standards to that in future to really kind of bed that in moving forward. There's 3 kind of key principles in the work that we're doing. We want the design code to be clear. It uses a must, should, could structure throughout to make sure everyone knows exactly what's expected. It needs to be usable. So it's a web-based platform. It's got a search function. It also has an adaptive checklist function, which we're going to embed within planning application process. So again, developers and those assessing planning applications know exactly what's being checked for and how that's going to be assessed. And then finally, bold. We're trying to strike that balance between aligning national best practice with those kind of local priorities and adoption criteria that we face. So in a nutshell, that's our design code. It's really about bridging that gap between what we're saying in our policy and those high ambitions and what we want to deliver on the ground, making sure that we've got that that we've got that bridge and that we operationalize some of that policy making to make those kind of on the ground decisions as straightforward and easy as possible. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Jack. Absolutely setting the standard on timekeeping, kicking us off. Thank you. I'm going to move us very quickly on to Tom, giving us the view from Surrey, where you're working on another design code.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can see that. And thank you very much, Jack, for that. So here's where we've actually put a design code in place in Surrey. This started back in 2020 when we were appointed by the council to review their current standards, include site visits, plenty of interviews with officers and stakeholders. And that led us to want to do 2 things. Firstly, instead of a guide, we decided it was time to produce a design code. Something that would give us that additional clarity and strength that Jack just alluded to. And secondly, we wanted to make it digital, so make it more accessible, turn it into a database, rather than just another sort of PDF that would sit on a website or sit on a shelf. So that is all now up and running, and we can have a look what's in it. So the code sets out rules for all new developments in Surrey. It's for highways adoption and for planning, and they're also going to apply to retrofit streets. You can have a look at it here. Just put a QR code and a link there for you. So this covers everything from the high level, looking at these really high level principles around layout, where we should, use DMRB, where we shouldn't, what's the hierarchy of users, down to these, details around materials and greenery that make, that relate to the character of Surrey and give it that sort of sense of place. So we, as I said, the code is sort of very visual. So we have a lot of diagrams. One thing we really sort of a lot of it was the street typologies and bringing in all the good stuff from Manual for Streets and updated guidance, along with all the research that Create Streets has done on what makes streets healthier, happier, and more prosperous. That included sections, really set out those clear dimensions. So essentially, we work towards a book of street typologies and a clear hierarchy, down to the rules around continuous crossings, greenery, etc. Really trying to sort of humanize the streets, and then down to the level of greenery, etc. as well. So lots of good precedents, lots of diagrams, lots of clear rules, musts, shoulds, and coulds. So how has it been? Used? Well, we helped the council put in place and ran training sessions for officers. So some key learnings from that were that just how useful it could be. And here's a good example of where it was applied. So this is a very typical development, medium size, no clear street hierarchy, very dominated by parking, lack of street trees, lack of differentiated materials. So just tarmac, wall-to-wall tarmac, and those junctions with wide radii and basically everything that sort of puts cars first rather than people. So this had gone through planning. So there's at that point, obviously, there's not much you can do around the layout, etc. It's too late for that, but just shows that the code was able to quickly make some significant changes to this design. So straight away, we could put in a proper street hierarchy using the hierarchy we set out in Healthy Streets for Surrey. We could then look at materials. So we now have differentiation of materials, which helps define those hierarchies. Instantly add more street trees, change how the parking works, sort of more on-street parking, more unallocated parking, and putting in things like continuous crossings as well. So all the good stuff. And feedback we had was, yeah, it's very effective and very helpful for doing so. So just a few final thoughts while I have a minute left. So it brought clarity. We kept it clear, we kept it visual. We had those clear rules around must, should, could. Our latest codes go a bit further. I think one thing about Surrey was perhaps a little bit too wordy, and we're really trying to up the number of diagrams and reduce the amount of text. Everything seems to be downstream of street typologies. If you can nail those street typologies, everything hangs off that. So your rules around materials, greenery, dimensions, setbacks, even those urban design considerations as well. So that pattern book approach has been really powerful. From personal to process, so what we mean by that is officers really liked being able to use the rules. So each rule had a number, and they could just, in their feedback to developers, they could clearly say, as per rule 4.x, which says must, you haven't complied with this. So there's very little sort of argument there. It really clarifies what you need to do. Online, absolutely the way to go. It's searchable, easy to disseminate. You can share it very easily, and opens doors for all sorts of features that we haven't explored yet, but perhaps things like street configurators, etc. And then a code allows you to have your battles once. So we bake in all these standards. We talk materials, we talk greenery, we discuss all these things with officers and stakeholders first, bake it into this pattern book, which means you're not then having these arguments each time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, so we've sort of heard about street design code, how we do this in detail. Someone has to adopt all of this, sort of post the planning process. Moving sort of from the local, the Surreys, Cheshire Wests, how do we actually bridge this friction from planning to adoption? We've got Becky Phillips-Mellish from Active Travel England, formerly of Lincolnshire as well, and you're going to talk a little bit about Active Travel England, but also about Lincolnshire. So over to you.
Amazing, thanks, David. Just wait for the slides to share. While that's happening, good afternoon, everyone. I am Becky Phillips-Mellish. I am the Head of Design Assurance at Active Travel England. But like David said, I previously managed the planning team in Highways Development Management at Lincolnshire County Council. So I suppose that is to say that I'm speaking from both a national and a very practical local authority perspective, seeing firsthand how some of those decisions made at planning either survive or unravel post-adoption. I can also see colleagues from both ATE and LCEC are on the call. So hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Will Elliott, particularly, I can see on the call, who helped to co-develop these slides for me. So thanks, Will. Next slide, please, Lauren. So I've split this into three themes. And the first, as you can see, is people. We found that generally unitary councils find it easier than two-tier councils to ensure delivery of quality infrastructure isn't unravelled post-planning permission, because there is that shared vision of priorities and objectives. There are exceptions to this, and this is where I'd flag Lincolnshire as one of them, and the key here is having exceptional leadership, which is therefore a reason why local government reorganisation offers a really good opportunity here. So if you're involved in shaping the structure of your teams post LGR, it would be really good to consider how you might align planners and engineers. If they can work in the same team, that would be ideal, but at the very least under the same director means that you're going to be working to aligned priorities. So that's a very practical tip that hopefully a lot of two-tier authorities can take forward. As an example, in Lincolnshire, the Highways Development Management team assessed transport impacts, street design, SUDS, flood risk, so they were very multidisciplinary. We also moved from the Highways Department into the Growth Department to give more autonomy in our decision making that was guided by highway maintenance implications, but it was also balanced alongside objectives for growth, placemaking, play, health, sustainability, so other priorities for the council. We also dealt with both planning applications and Section 38 adoptions and had experts in both of those disciplines involved at every stage. So to make sure the decisions that we made at planning were then able to be followed through at Section 38 stage. We also had an office presence, which post-COVID was virtual in some cases, 1 day a week with our local planning authorities, and we basically made ourselves available for that day to discuss emerging and complex issues and kind of go through quick fire queries. Next slide, please. The second theme is process. So bringing adoption engineers or just discussions about ongoing maintenance and adoption into the fold post-planning permission is just too late. Ideally, these conversations need to be happening at that kind of early visioning stage. So during the production of master plans and design codes on those more significant sites, on your smaller residential sites, that could be at pre-app or even at outline stage. But the key here is that those discussions are had early on what standards and expectations are, and also the extent of the adoptable spaces to make sure that that is carefully considered throughout the design evolution. Obviously, then it avoids abortive work for the developer, or crucially, with what we're talking about today, it actually not being delivered on the ground in the kind of final instance. Again, with an example specifically from Lincolnshire, we spent a lot of time building up really strong relationships with our house builders and our local planning authorities, which meant that we were approached from both at pre-app stage, which is so helpful for being able to have those early conversations. And those conversations were held with both engineers from the planning side and from the adoption side to make sure that everybody was kind of cited on the decision making. We encouraged early engagement with neighbourhood plans and with neighbourhood design codes, so directly with communities as well, not just with the people that are actually, pushing this through in terms of industry. And we were integral in developing design codes and master plans for our sustainable urban extensions as well. Next slide, please. And then the last theme is policy. So obviously there needs to be a really clear public-facing standard, expectation, commitment to good design from your highways development management team. That could be a definitive statement on the website, for example, about the fact that you use manual for streets, that you use building for a healthy life, streets for a healthy life. Could be a local design code, could be some local design guidance. One of the things that has come up regularly in conversations between ATE and stakeholders around the barriers to delivering quality placemaking is commuted sums. Nobody on the call will be surprised about that, I'm sure. A good step here is to try and estimate those fees at planning stage to enable those honest discussions and any necessary compromises to be had out in the open as early as possible. So if viability is a concern relating to commuted sums, then actually being able to have that conversation of, if we have to prioritise and compromise, can we make sure that we deliver really high quality outcomes in your local centres, at your focal points, as opposed to then everything being removed when a large fee is presented as a bit of a shock post-planning to developers. What I would say as well, though, is that ideally highway authorities will take some time to reflect on whether their fees are proportionate. So, for example, whether they're taking the similar kind of risk-based approach to the maintenance that's going to happen on those non-standard materials as they do with standard materials. So not just expecting that they will be maintaining to the manufacturer's expectations, because that isn't the approach that's taken with positive drainage systems, for example, or asphalt roads. consider the national expectations that are being placed on developers around delivering tree-lined streets and SUDs, and about how we can actually support in that on the ground. And again, maybe taking a slightly broader view on what are the priorities and objectives of the council as a whole, and not just the highway maintenance department. So what is the vision and commitment of your council in its entirety to sustainability, to health, to placemaking, to social interaction on safe routes to school? And again, as my final example from Lincolnshire, we were very clear that our expectation was manual for streets, it was streets for a healthy life. It was never design manual for roads and bridges. We didn't charge commuted sums for trees and for most SUDS assets because we took a pragmatic approach to balancing those maintenance requirements and the long-term impact on design. We'd also provide an indicative Section 38 bond and fee, and an indicative advanced payment codes, APC, bond and fee at planning stage, which would enable developers to forecast what those costs were likely to be. And that also had the benefit of nudging them towards putting streets forward for adoption rather than keeping them private. Next slide, please, Lauren. Just wrapping up now. This is a shameless plug. So AT are currently producing a supplementary planning advice note on frameworks for street adoption. So if anyone has any insights or reflections that it would be helpful for us to feed into that piece of work, then please get in touch, because it would be great to have the conversation. Thank you very much.
You've earned a shameless plug. Thank you very much. I actually do remember one of the lines that really stuck with me when we started working with yourselves was on commuter sums, we want nice things, which was quite a nice response. I've used that many times since with other local authorities. Right, it's time to get our hands dirty. Looking at the nuts and bolts, and we're going to go over to Lewis Hubbard from Lewis Hubbard Engineering, who has 7 minutes to cover all of engineering involved in street design and why we need to talk to engineers a bit more and a bit earlier.
Thank you, David. It's I'll try to do it, a deep dive in 7 minutes. So I'm Lewis Hubbard, Civil Engineer, Director of Lewis Hubbard Engineering, and I think I'm going to try and reduce this initially to 4 important things to think about with the engineering of streets. Some of this echoes what people have said already. So I think the engineering you have to start really by thinking about what you're really trying to achieve. And for me, that's the engineering working in service to the urban design and place character. Engineering has its own kind of important parts, but they do have to fit in that bigger picture that Becky was just describing. Of course, it must be robust, and of course, we've got to use materials and resources carefully. Secondly, or number 2, I'd say that engineering design must consider use, materials, geometry, levels, and drainage and utilities all together. If we don't consider those things all together, in engineering terms, the road will probably fail. I think I've said that, and I think it's kind of a message to people procuring, clients, local authorities procuring design, because I think quite often you do see kind of layouts, geometries, kind of plans set out, and then someone adds in a bit of drainage or thinks about the utilities a bit later. Or indeed, sometimes with utilities, not at all. We've all seen kind of utility scars in roads and them kind of going all over the place. And the way that they can be, it can kind of be disorganized with other kind of elements of the street is a real problem. I think it also, if those things aren't all considered together, it will fail in policy terms as well. Street infrastructure is where many of our policy ambitions are realized. That's in urban design and planning ambitions, but also in environmental ambitions with utility infrastructure, whether that's electrification, whether that's communications. So streets are conduits of infrastructure as well as streets in and of themselves. 3, street design should be the composition and assembly of a normal set of component parts. Ordinary places can be beautiful. This is my view, that ordinary places can be beautiful, convivial, and generous with a clever assembly of normal materials. There are, of course, some instances where special materials are, worthy and kind of really bring value. But ordinary places, I think, for ordinary places, normal materials suffice, but can still be wonderful. So I think kind of some street features should be normalized, maybe, obviously street trees, rain gardens, continuous footways. And the image below here gives a Dutch-style entrance curb across a continuous footway and a rain garden in the background. So I think it kind of really captures something nicely. And I think, kind of echoing what Tom and Jack have said, highways authorities need to make clear what is acceptable. And unfortunately, I think there's a culture amongst kind of engineering design teams that people kind of assume things aren't acceptable, and therefore they won't necessarily try to pursue them. So it almost kind of the prompt needs to come from the highways authority. And fourth, all roads fail eventually. It's kind of just like anything mechanical that you would expect to fail if it's worn and torn and, over time. Robustness and build quality and maintainability help. Different pavement constructions have relative merits, but I don't think they're always very well understood. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a study into mentioning kind of a few of the things that I don't think are always understood about different pavement surfaces. So first of all, asphalt, ubiquitous. It does have many merits. It's cheap and quick to lay and repair. It's quite adaptable. It creates a smooth and grippy surface when it's in good condition, and it gives easy access to utilities, and it's relatively easy to reinstate. But it's vulnerable to rutting and potholes and deformation and wear, as we all know. I think we all also know that the reinstatements and repairs are very short-lived. They often kind of open up again shortly after patched. I think asphalt confers a prioritization of cars, and it can be monotonous when widely used. This image is of a seafront road in Jaywick. It's a slightly unfair indictment of asphalt, given that this road is not adopted and has its kind of own specific engineering challenges of the adjacent seawall and so forth. So I thought I'd be a little bit kinder to asphalt and say, well, it can be used suitably and be quite pleasant in certain places. Natural stone sets and slabs, of course, characterful, natural, and can be strong, but they're often laid on mortar beds and concrete bases, which in engineering terms is known as rigid construction. Rigid constructions often fail at the joints in the concrete base. So the idea that it's this kind of this uniformly strong thing is not always true. They require perfect construction, in my view, and therefore probably site supervision to be robust and mitigate its kind of inherent weaknesses. And it can be an expensive use of materials, especially if the base is reinforced. Here's an image of a road in Bexley where the kind of base is being laid beneath some granite. You can see the base beneath some granite paving. Once you've done it, it also gives you incredibly poor access to utilities. So it's kind of a one and done. It's really hard to reinstate and replace. So it's there's a kind of sense of permanence about it, but I think it really has to be got right if you're going to do a rigid construction at all. And then clay and concrete block pavers. Again, they're strong. They're resistant to potholes and rutting. They kind of give more effective reinstatement and can add character. But they have slower repairs than asphalt, which is why some highways authorities find them quite challenging. They're like any flexible pavement construction, they're very dependent on their fixed points of restraint all around, so it's part of the engineering design. And I think people don't always know and appreciate as well, they're often laid on an asphalt base. So the concrete pavers work like a kind of hard crust on top of an asphalt road. The pavers do offset some of the layers of asphalt, but it's not kind of, it's not one or the other. It's a kind of the build-up is a combination of both things. I think my kind of reflections on the engineering design of roads. Well, clearly there's more than one way to build a road, and we need to use all of the tools available to kind of meet those objectives set out at the beginning. I've heard from an American a term that I really liked. We used often the term healthy streets. It's described as complete streets, which I think kind of also confers an idea of kind of engineering integrity to all those other layers of kind of street infrastructure. And also an idea I'd just kind of like to share is that a lot of the design decisions, block paving and natural stone paving is the kind of British standard that you use to design it is BSEN 7533 Part 101. And a lot of design decisions are kind of manifest, in engineering terms using that document. It's not terribly complicated. I think that non-engineers would actually benefit from giving it a bit of a kind of a study and review and become familiar by to help them understand kind of some of the design decisions they might make. For example, natural stone sets on a high traffic road might end up leading to a reinforced concrete base, which might then make you change your mind on what you're kind of proposing in the first place.
Lewis, I'm going to jump in. We've had, thank you so much. We've had a lot of good questions and nitty gritty. You get into the chat, have a look, because I probably am going to have to come back to you on a few very specific things about trees and how you lay block pavers. Very quickly, we're going to cross the channel. Paris is undergoing one of the most ambitious sort of urban greening transformations. I'm sure most people on this call have seen that. To tell us how they're doing it and how I think they're going to continue doing it following the recent electoral results, we've got Victor Baron, formerly of Paris City Hall.
Yes, thank you, David, and thank you for inviting me and your interest in Paris. So I'm Victor Baron. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff of Deputy Mayor Christophe Nejdovsky in Paris since 2021 and until the end of the term, which is by the end of the week. As you know, the mayoral elections were held just last weekend. So now is actually a good time to give a little overview of how we carried out politically public space transformation during the term. So first, So first, a bit of context. City of Paris only gained authority in traffic management and parking just in 2002, so it's quite recent. And during the 20th century, state government implemented policies and designed public space in Paris, putting cars first, along with the spirit of the 20th century, with the construction of the ring road in the 70s and the entry of highways inside of Paris, notably one cutting through Paris from west to east, along the banks of the Seine. So in 2014, Anne Hidalgo gained a strong legitimacy from the election, just as Bertrand Delanoë before her in 2001, but carrying a stronger program to transform really public space as less land was available. So here you can see some of the symbolic projects that were carried by Anne Hidalgo during her first term. So of course the pedestrianization of the banks of the Seine, which is still one of the biggest legacy in Paris. It took really a power struggle with the state administration, which still has authority over highways, but the pedestrianization process had in fact already begun with tactical urbanism and a summer event each year since 2002, and with much popular success. And you can also see on the right one major and symbolic project of the bike plan in Paris, so Rivoli Street, which is at the very center of Paris and was really well known to be a very congested axis. It has been radically redesigned, reducing the number of traffic lanes from 4 at the beginning of the century to 2, and today even 1 only for cars and 1 for buses, leaving the rest of the road to bicycles. So it embodies really the radicality, I think, of the changes made by Anne Hidalgo. And at the beginning of her second term in 2020, the mayor put greening as a new priority. So actually serving the same goal to reduce car space in Paris, car traffic, and in order to reduce air pollution in Paris, but also serving a second goal to reduce urban heat island effects and to freshen Paris. So once again, setting symbolic goals that you can see and having like what we call quick wins to make them really concrete is one of key aspects, I think, of the success of some of the Parisian projects. And as I used to say, along with Christophe Nejdovsky, you can summarize the project, the method of project that we carried in Paris in 3 following steps: carry radical change, then test it, and 3, repeat what is popular, and in order to make the transformation global. So having said that, remains the difficulty, of course, to green a city dense as Paris and as many European cities. So here the three main levers that we used since 2020. So the creation of park, of course, is kind of the historic tool, and therefore the biggest remaining lever was to create new spaces for Parisians using the car space, which is the biggest remaining land available in Paris. But greening public space, of course, I think it needs innovation. It needs new ideas. It's not just as building parks. So Anne Hidalgo asked, as soon as she arrived, asked for a study to create urban forest. So kind of a pocket square dedicated to nature with trees planted with high density. So here's one, the first urban forest in Paris, so in Catalan Square. Here you can see the second urban forest, which is on an abandoned railway and a freight train station. And finally, I just wanted to say a few words about this participatory initiative, which would translate as beautify your neighborhood in English. Because in 2020 and during the election campaign, Anne Hidalgo faced many attacks from her opponents regarding the number of public works happening in the same time and place in Paris and in every Paris. So in 2020, she appointed a dedicated deputy mayor, and they created a specific initiative to mitigate roadworks and to plan and gather them at the same time and space, neighborhood by neighborhood. So it concerns both maintenance and new public space projects, with each neighborhood attributed a public budget to make public space transformation, and actually gave power to arrondissement, to the boroughs, to make these changes with a clear action frame, a time frame also, and to associate citizens more efficiently and share with them actually the tricky decisions that needed to be taken. So here are some of the examples that we carried in Paris within this initiative, and of course, Cool Streets, as you may have heard about. So thank you. Sorry, I've been a bit long, I think.
No, thank you. That was fantastic, and probably many things that a lot of our audience haven't seen before. Right, final speaker, last but not least, back to the UK and the scale of our housing challenge. How do we ensure that our new developments are actually healthy? We have Annabelle Keegan, who's going to be talking a bit about Streets for a Healthy Life.
Thanks, David. Just share my screen. Can you see that okay? Perfect. Does that come up? Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, hi everybody. I'm Annabelle Keegan. So I'm a technical director for PJA based in Birmingham. So I'm here to talk to you today about some work that we've been doing on an update to Streets for a Healthy Life on behalf of Homes England. Homes England are obviously very interested in delivery as the England's housing accelerator. It's about getting numbers and actually delivery on the ground. So how do we contribute to kind of healthy streets for a healthy life within that context? So hopefully you'll have all seen the 2022 version of Streets for a Healthy Life, but we have been commissioned and we have now kind of pretty much completed a 2026 update to Streets for a Healthy Life. It's in having its final checks at the moment, and we're anticipating it to be published sometime in the next kind of month or so, I would hope. This kind of looks at the considerations within building for a healthy life across 3 scales of development, from macro to micro. And the important thing within this is that 6 out of the 12 considerations within building for a healthy life focus on street design. So in terms of delivering design quality, if we're not getting a good street design, we are failing to deliver quality places based on the building for a healthy life metric that Homes England use as one of their KPIs through their assessment process. So in order to kind of help with that process, Streets for a Healthy Life has pulled together a series of good practice examples from around England. And the first part that was published back in 2022 includes some analysis of 4 different street types, taking photography of some good practice case studies, which basically do good practice every day, streets. They don't necessarily do anything fancy, but they are fully adopted and have been included purely because they are good examples of fully adopted streets. So in terms of the update that we've been doing, we've been back to some of the case studies. So for example, this is Whitmore Drive, which is in Colchester. We've been out with a drone, we've got some nice photography, and we've done detailed analysis of those case studies, kind of updating that and bringing it forward. But the most important bit in terms of what's coming next is we have taken a really deep dive into 9 case studies, some of which are new to part 2 of the document, some of which you'll recognise from part 1. We've tried to get a good geographic spread across England. We've struggled a little bit kind of with the Midlands kind of area, but we've also tried to get a good spread of case studies that have either been around for a long time. I think the example of Telford Millennium Community, I spotted that on a couple of Becky's slides that she presented, so as an example of good practice, but also some really kind of up-to-date and new case studies, including Ebbsfleet Garden Community, which is included in there. To try and make the document as kind of user-friendly as possible, what we've done is put together a matrix of all the case studies that we're putting forward in part 2 and showed kind of where they provide good examples of some of the design details that we struggle with kind of every day. I think we get asked the same questions again and again at design review panels, certainly that we do where we do building for a healthy life assessments. Can you just provide me a good example of a continuous footway? Can you just provide me a good example of a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit? Or could you provide me an example of a connected edge lane? And the idea with this table is that you'll be able to navigate through the document nice and easily and take you through to good practice examples of them. In terms of kind of the details that are going into the document, we've spent a lot of time working with the design teams. We've been provided with a fantastic range of information by the developers and their teams that have worked on the case studies. We've pulled together as much information as we possibly can within those, using lots of nice graphics, lots of nice cross sections, lots of nice plans, and really tried to get into the nitty-gritty of how these case studies work, what makes them good, so that people can kind of learn from the best practice and kind of replicate and kind of use those details elsewhere. But most importantly, they can kind of be rest assured that those details have been adopted by the Highway Authority where they've been delivered. We've also, as part of the work, we've collated average speed data and 5-year collision data as part of the case study, so we can really demonstrate some of kind of the safety concerns. We can demonstrate that they are actually achieving what they set out to do in terms of delivery of slow and healthy environments. And we've also kind of provided helpful designers notes where if people aren't so familiar with the technical process, we've provided little helpful links to take you through to information that people might want to use within that process. We've also aligned all of the information to the Building for Healthy Life considerations, so people can see how it kind of relates back to its parent document. We've also as well gone out and we've captured some really nice drone imagery for some of the case studies. Picture paints 1,000 words in terms of the quality of the case studies, and try to really kind of annotate and show what it is about those case studies that kind of demonstrates good practice. What do they do differently? And it's not always about kind of fancy materials. It might just be in terms of the structure or the street types that they deliver. In terms of kind of the things that I think are most important in terms of that delivery, so Becky mentioned the supplementary planning advice note. So we're aligning Streets for a Healthy Life with the supplementary planning advice note that we've also been working on with ATE. And one of the things I point out, and it's also kind of stating the obvious really, but it's the fact that technical approval is governed by the Highways Act, and everything that we're currently securing in terms of design quality at the moment is secured by the Town and Country Planning Act. So in terms of kind of where things typically go wrong, it's the transition from planning to tech approval. And I think kind of as Becky alluded to, the authorities that are doing that well are the ones that join together those two processes and actually kind of bring those teams together, and recognizing that this is a complicated process, fairly unique, certainly not something that France suffers with, or even Scotland, for example, is that these are not separate processes in other countries. So in terms of what we're considering in Streets for a Healthy Life, and is also in the span, we are kind of using the same information in again to kind of bring together those, is the recommendation to introduce something called a design deliverability check. This is based on some good practice that we pulled up as part of the baseline research, and it's something that Worcestershire County Council are currently offering for off-site works through Section 278. But we're bringing that in as a recommendation and actually basically doing what Becky said, Lincolnshire are already doing very well, and bringing those teams together so that conversations are happening early, conversations around technical approval are discussed during planning, so that ultimately when we get to that transition into the delivery stages from stage 3, as it's shown on this diagram here, the teams are aligned and everybody kind of has the same kind of vision for what those streets would look like, so that we don't see the kind of devolution and destruction of kind of design quality through the process. I think there's a great graphic that Amy from Homes England shows where she's got a jelly, and it starts off at the start of a process. I should have put this in the slide deck. It starts off as a perfect jelly, and by the time it gets to delivery, it looks like a jelly splat. So it's basically to try and avoid that. So everybody needs to talk together. And everybody kind of hopefully will be able to use the good practice and good principles that are set out in Streets for a Healthy Life. So I think, David, I have done that in under target time.
Thank you very much. No, I think finish on the jelly, definitely. That's I love that analogy. Brilliant. Thank you very much. The speakers have done all their work now, almost. Over to the audience. We've already got some questions coming in. I think I'm going to sort of dive straight into a few of those. Please keep firing them into the chat and we'll sort of filter them through, and I'll ask and we'll get everyone to answer. Got 166 people, I think, still here, which is a phenomenal turnout. This is a big issue that we keep coming across at Create Streets. I'm going to say the first one, Alexis, very good question. We want nice things. Lots of urban designers on here who want nice things, but we're not necessarily paying to look after them. How do you balance competing the demand for beautiful places against value engineering or the maintenance budgets? And I think I may actually turn to you, Becky, because you started answering this, so you might as well share it with everyone, I think.
Yes, happy to. So I just reflected that back in 2017, Lincolnshire County Council did a study of some of the developments that had been adopted recently, which had SUDS assets within them, and did an exercise where we did a risk-based approach to what the maintenance and replacement costs would be of those developments with SUDS versus if they were to have been constructed with a traditional kind of pipe and gully drainage system. And actually, across those sites that we studied, it was 27% cheaper for the SUDS to have been delivered versus a traditional positive drainage system. So I suppose it's just a flag that beautiful doesn't always mean more expensive. It can, and obviously there are like levels to that, but inherently it doesn't have to be a more burdensome impact, I guess, on highway maintenance budgets. So it's a case by case basis, and like I said in my slides, I think there needs to be some level of compromise and recognizing where you can have the most impact. We're not saying that every single street in a development has to be, the highest quality block paving and trees and suds everywhere, but maybe you can just choose those kind of critical areas where it has the highest impact.
Yeah, it sort of strikes me as well. It ties into your point on governance and organizational structure, which is, okay, yeah, if you're in the maintenance department and someone plants a tree, that's just a liability for you. But if you're sort of in the same directorate, which is about reducing ambient temperature, increasing value of houses, because we know trees do that, slowing speeds, you're actually sort of, okay, yes, there's a maintenance cost. Well, guess what? There's a cost to everything, but you're in the same team capturing those benefits. And it's certainly something we've seen with SUDS where we've actually used it to try and get more density. And obviously you can get more density. Yes, there's a slight cost of the SUD, but you're getting it back in spades in, 10% extra homes. Annie, you have your hand up as well, possibly for this question as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say something about it, just in terms of kind of the baseline research which we've done for the supplementary planning advice note. So a lot of the messages that came from developers were that commuted sums aren't necessarily a problem. It's knowing and kind of anticipating the costs so that they can factor that into their land budget. So it's not necessarily they're averse to paying them, but they do need to factor that in and take it off the land value as part of that process. So early conversations around commuted sums are kind of the lesson. It's not necessarily the price itself that's the concern, but it's having the conversations early enough so they understand the cost. I think, Becky, that was certainly what we kind of took away, but you're right, all of the points around like the ongoing maintenance costs, but developers just want certainty really in the process.
Absolutely. Right, I'm going to move on to some more. Lewis, after your point, there was quite a few interesting questions around the bases. I think everyone sort of we like the nice concrete set, sorry, the nice stone sets, some of the block paving, but you talked about what bases not to use. So I think we had some questions on, do you have to have a concrete base? Is your preference sort of flexible versus rigid, and what does that mean in practice? And I guess is that something that can be covered by codification? You know, what your views on how to actually lay good sets and lay good block paving?
The build-up's there to give it adequate strength, so it doesn't disintegrate or fall apart or subside or kind of fail really. So whether the base is needed or not, it depends on kind of the likely loading. Most roads, most adoptable roads at least, will have some heavy traffic, so they will need kind of adequate strength to deal with that. Really, you kind of like to think there are more materials available, but I kind of come back to the British standard, which pretty much promotes either concrete bases or asphalt bases or cement-bound granular material, which is just kind of adding cement to kind of granular mixes. And I think, in my view, I prefer flexible constructions.
And what does that mean for
so
non-engineers?
that basically means not concrete.
Okay.
I think the moment you go with concrete, you have to deal with contraction joints and expansion joints.
Right.
If it's unreinforced, then you can only get about 4 meters between all of the joints, which then get reflected through to the surface and then can cause kind of cracking and degradation at the surface. So if you need a kind of span of more than 4 meters, you then need to start reinforcing, and you end up with this kind of enormous carbon-intensive structure there, which is completely impenetrable until you want to, if you want to do anything with it. So I'm personally a great fan of flexible pavements, which then, the way the British standard kind of works, leads you towards more concrete block pavers and clay pavers, and possibly cropped granite sets versus sawn granite sets, and that's where it gets a little bit complicated. But I think flexible construction is kind of the way to go. Then you're kind of into the debate of asphalt versus block paver, which kind of then harks back to your point before about where you have to try and consider all of these things in the round on a maintenance budget. Yes, asphalt is the most effective, but it's not like asphalt's perfect either. It's falling apart all over the place. It's a political horror show because it's potholing all of the time. So I think nothing's perfect. So you're just trying to kind of balance the risks and the benefits in the round.
You very nicely, and we've not planned this, teed up and used the word risk, which I'm surprised no one's mentioned as much. Hell, maybe I've missed it, but maybe more of a sort of stepping up a bit and a bit more of a philosophical point is, I mean, I've been sitting in lots of workshops, and there's always, or there often are voices around, this might happen. Oh, but what if this happens? What if this happens? Do we fundamentally have an issue with how we treat risk and the public realm? And are we overly risk averse in this? Do we need to change this? Do we know why we're overly risk averse? It's an open question if any of our panelists want to jump in.
I think there's sometimes a question, David, about what risks are we used to measuring and are we used to used to aligning to, and that's where you get into the whole conversation about guardrails and things like that, but you don't consider how they're kind of making roads faster, quicker, easier for vehicles might introduce its own risks. So I think there is a conversation. I think possibly part of the issue, though, is that a lot of those risks end up on the individual designers or the individual kind of officers' plate, and they feel that, well, I don't want to be the one that ends up in tribunal about this. And you can kind of understand that, right? I mean, there's a certain logic to that. And I think
on that, sorry, on the tribunal point, because that was raised. Do you think this is something which is sort of a bigger issue than is thought, or is a perceived risk of going to tribunal versus how many times it's actually happened? And I guess following on from that, even if it is perceived, that's still, for everyone on this call, they don't necessarily want even the tiniest percentage chance you might go to tribunal. So why would you take that for a housing development that could be hundreds of miles away from where you live? But is there something we need to change or could be done at a governmental level or a national body level to kind of give officers a mitigation or protection against this? If you're just trying to put a raised table across the street, or do something which is done sort of in most of our streets built before 1950s.
Well, I think that's the thing to me. A lot of this stuff is new to us, but not necessarily new. And I think the emerging manual for streets guidance, the Streets for Healthy Life, all of these kind of points are pointing us towards this isn't just some council officer that's gone off in a wacky way and decided to do their own thing. I think the more and more this gets embedded nationally and used more widely, the less it feels like an individual risk. So trying to take it out of that individual's kind of court, I suppose.
Brilliant. Right, I'm going to. I've seen Urban Design Group, which I imagine might be Rob or others, has put a question in which I was going to ask anyway, so I will ask it from yourselves. Should the Highways Act be amended so that highway authorities have due regard to government guidance, such as manual streets, with the manual being elevated to statutory guidance? And I might kind of put a top spin on that as well, which is we're all sort of here because we have people working in planning to a Planning Act, and then we have people working to a Highways Act. Very different timescales. Totally different literally different departments. So no wonder there is a kind of broken process. Should we change this, merge these acts, have a new act, or do something different? Who from our panel would like to take one or all or some of that question?
Can I just say yes?
Okay.
I was just going to say yes as well.
Okay, yes to the amendment and also to a new Highways Act. Okay.
Well, I think Becky's probably got kind of more insight on it than I do, but I'd say kind of yes to both. And I think kind of what it needs to end up creating is a kind of an evolution. I think there needs to be reform of highways authorities and the way they work. I think they've kind of been reduced to kind of a reductive version of kind of the obligations under the Highways Act. And I think they need to be empowered and resourced. Of course, I mean, it's easy to say that, isn't it? But they need to be empowered and resourced to effectively become proactive contributors towards great places, spaces, and prosperity, rather than kind of, I don't know, it's unfair, but an industry in maintaining potholes. Becky.
Becky and Danny, feel free to. I'll go to Becky first.
I completely agree with that. I think I actually came from a highway maintenance background before I moved into highways development management, and it wasn't until I moved into highways development management that I really understood the value of placemaking. So I think that's obviously only anecdotal for me, but I think a lot of highway maintenance engineers don't think about, I suppose, their role as stewards of places. Like you've kind of talked about, it is just filling potholes, reactively responding to dangerous situations that have arisen, rather than thinking about the kind of bigger picture of what our streets are actually here to do and the people that they serve and the communities that they serve. And
sort of, I guess, in devil's advocate from their side is Traffic Management Act 2000 says all you care about is the what's a free flowing movement? Someone's going to correct me.
Expeditious
movement. That's it, not free flowing. Which I know can include walking, cycling. Someone's always going to say that, but still, if I'm an engineer, I will read that and probably think, well, that's my bag, so that's what I'm going to focus on. Personal question, Becky. Actually, what was the first thing you went to or read or saw from a maintenance and materials sort of engineering background that got you interested in placemaking?
I don't know. I can't remember that.
Okay, I'll leave that.
I'll
if you think
that.
about it,
yeah.
jump in, because I do think there is something here around. We do it sometimes. Teaching engineers urban design, teaching urban design, and teaching engineering to urban designers. I think there's a really good. I don't think that will solve everything, because I do think there are sort of fundamental misaligned incentives here, but that could go a long way to being like, hey, you might be in the adoption team, but actually you're in charge of creating a beautiful place. Did you know that? Or solving the climate crisis, or whatever it may be.
That's exactly what TfL did. So in terms of the changing of kind of objectives for TfL from kind of, I don't think it was expeditious movement of vehicles or whatever the term was, but it was something similar where they were simply reporting on kind of movement of vehicles and kind of network performance, and that KPI changed to focusing in exactly what we're talking about, and that completely changed the way that they report to government around things, around street design. So, and in fact, I think the fact, kind of as probably Robert's put in the chat, that it's 1980, the Highways Act, it's 46 years old this year, whereas the Planning Act is 1990. The two documents simply don't align, do they, in terms of where we are in time? And I agree, it does need a refresh.
Any other thoughts on that? Right, I'm going to go on to a slightly different topic. The utilities, and we do all this nice stuff, and then someone comes along and digs it up and ruins it. Do we need to think and set higher standards and obligations? This is from S. Keenan for reinstatement for utility companies to protect the quality of our public realm. I might come to Tom on this because I know that this is something we've looked at a bit in Create Streets with street scales.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a problem. I mean, coming back to the materials point that Lewis raised, I think that is a big part of it. And why flexible construction is, I think, a very good idea. But then I think the pushback we always get on that is just the sort of obviously issues with managing those highways companies that then rip that up and will just chuck away all your nice blocks. And the sort of lack of the supply chain and the lack of skills in supply chain seems to be an issue as well. So it has been quite difficult to install this stuff correctly. And that obviously is a problem. And then for new developments, one thing we're really trying to get into code is thinking about, in those street hierarchies, in those typologies, is all these practical things like where do utilities go? How do we route them? How do we make sure that they are in suitable corridors, but then not sort of over-engineering that and putting in sort of excessively wide verges and excessively wide margins that sort of add no value in terms of place or movement even.
That is a good point. When we're talking about coding, quite a lot of the time we're talking about brand new places. So if you are going to use a bit of your asphalt, stick your utilities under that, and you can dig it up for a place with asphalt. If you've got a really nice kind of series of sets or block paving, then possibly think about putting your utilities in a different channel. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to go and get a view from Paris again, I think. So we had a question from Tanya, again about materials. So Victor, in Paris, how did you deal with natural street surfaces? Did you use this kind of flexible, rigid construction that Lewis was talking about? Do you have a different solution? How have you managed to kind of create so many beautiful streets now in Paris?
Yes, for the construction material used for roads, actually, we do not have, I think, other solution than concrete and really non-permeable road. But really, we're trying, and it answers also another question. We're trying to focus really on greening and to depave where it's possible, where there isn't any underground network, and to put water management and to make the rain flow go in the green spaces. So with inclination of the road, just a really slight inclination of the road toward the green spaces that we are planning and making just on the side of the road. So I don't know. I'm not sure it answers completely the question about material. Really, it's mainly asphalt, yes. And we are using more and more clear asphalt for pedestrianized area. So all of the streets that we are redesigning, which are no longer car-centered, but pedestrian-centered, these are constructed with clear asphalt.
Brilliant, thank you.
David, can I add in a couple of bits on that as well? Just because I've seen permeable pavements and things come up in the chat, and I just I thought about adding them into my presentation, but I was hoping it'd kind of come up in the Q&A. I think permeable pavements are excellent, to be honest, and some highways authorities do adopt them. Some don't, as I think has been listed in the chat as well. I think there are kind of general misunderstandings about permeable pavements that the water just sort of goes in and it's gone. They always have to. They are an engineered construction from top to bottom, and they need a kind of a special type of subbase as well, which can contain the water. And then when the water's in there, it needs to be able to go somewhere else. So it's you need to kind of understand the ground conditions. Is the ground permeable, or then kind of under drain it? And that's kind of feeding back into my point in my presentation about lots of technical things need to be considered together. I think kind of in defense of, I really, really like permeable surfaces, but in defense of impermeable surfaces, it makes it much easier to allow water runoff to then go to a tree pit, or go to a rain garden, or go to a swale as the water sort of flows over the surface. Once it's in a permeable pavement, it can then be quite difficult to get it back up and out to then go to some kind of street, greening. And it's not impossible, because it could go into the roots of a tree pit or something like this. But it kind of, there's always a little bit more kind of engineering that goes with it than is kind of sometimes understood in design circles. And also, they're not very compatible with utilities, despite all the kind of paraphernalia you often see from green, blue, urban. I would also then say that, kind of on your point before, I do think utility companies have sort of too much power. And again, it's another act, the New Roads and Streetworks Act. And if you listen to a utility company, they might say, no, I don't want any street trees or rain gardens within 6 meters of my water main. I mean, it's just impossible in urban places. So compromises need to be found.
And it's nonsense. I remember, the team did a walk around with a Hackney Cabinet member, and we were in Old Street, and there were some pretty damn big trees. And he said, there are more cables here than sort of anywhere else, and we've got a bunch of trees. Like, you can do it. I think that for me comes back to this sort of risk point. If you're a utilities company, of course you don't want a 0.001% chance of risk. Why? How do you benefit from it? So you might as well put some guidance out. So I think that to me, it's on this risk point. Jack, you have your hand up. Then I'm going to jump into one or two more questions before wrapping up.
Sure, just briefly. Just underlining a point that Tom raised really around skills, and I think it's really interesting. We often think about this just as an infrastructure problem, but particularly where on the design code where we've been looking at block paving and issues like that, there's a real challenge in getting the skills, and lots of feedback around if it was laid properly, then absolutely that'd be grand. But it's one thing to get someone to lay it properly to start with, and then it's another thing again to get the utility company to have that skill set as well. And I think we've just got to be realistic that often we are working in a very constrained environment when it comes to those skills. And it goes back to points that I made before in terms of you don't always need that kind of higher level of material use to get a quality place.
Yeah, you use it in a targeted way, I think was exactly. a really good kind of point that was made. On the scale, I do agree. A slight bugbear of mine on skills is that we're not going to get the skills until we start sort of providing the demand, ourselves, for things like block paving. So I do think there is going to be it won't be perfect. We're going to have to do some places that just get on with it, and then it almost creates the need for. I know, Lewis, we've spoken about the machines that can just lay block paving, right? And if we have enough places, Cheshire West, if you get together with Cheshire East and you go up to Liverpool, maybe you guys can club together, buy one of these machines, and then you kind of it really reduces the cost of implementing. That might be a mad idea, but it was just something we've been talking about. Final question, looking at timing. Someone's going for some free advice, so I applaud that. Calderdale is just about to start work on its streetscape design code to complement the placemaking and design SPD that we currently have adopted. Is there any advice? Tom, I might go to you on that one. If you can give any advice in a couple of minutes.
Well, it's a point create streets, obviously, would be the first one. And I suppose, coming back to what we said earlier, I think going digital is the way to go. So start with that rather than thinking about it as a document. That's been really helpful for in the other codes we're working on. I think start with look at what works well in your area, go around your sites, what is working well, what isn't, what can you do better. And I think a couple of those approaches we talked around sort of a palette book, the passive book approach to street topologies and details, and also materials palette, I think is really key. That also answers a lot of the questions we've had around, materials and reinstatement. You can do a lot with a limited palette of standard materials. You can still add a lot of creativity, a lot of different designs, but then it, helps reduce those things around lead-in times and storage, etc. as well.
I agree. Just on the go digital as well, because I know that can terrify lots of people. We've got to go and build websites. A lot of the time, that just means start with a spreadsheet, because then it sort of forces you into categorization and very clear rules. So, if you have a spreadsheet, you can digitize that very, very easily. Sometimes a PDF is actually pretty hard to sort of retrospectively digitize. You can do it. We've done it, but it's a bit harder. And yeah, on the, just maybe one other thought on the coding sort of really quick rules for Graham is you don't have to code for everything. Like it's probably better that you code sort of really firmly and really, in a sort of really bold, strong way on a small section. Because coding is not about saying this is everything that you can ever consider. It's just about sort of raising that bottom baseline from sort of rubbish to good ordinary, which is the phrase we use. Right, I'm going to wrap up. Otherwise, as I know, we're going to get cut off because we're going to give you your lunch break if that is left back at 1:45. All right, so we've covered a lot. We still have a good number of people here. I think the kind of overview is adoption gap isn't just a technical failure. It's a bit of a communication failure. We do have some of these skills and do have some of this knowledge, but we need to bring that highways knowledge and engineering knowledge and brains into the early stages of planning design, whether that's pre-app or vision, through codification, through individuals, through working with engineers and whatever it may be. We've covered modal hierarchy, locking this in through design codes, worries about personal liability and how can we sort of mitigate that. Use musts in your code, build it with web first. We've just spoken about nail your street typologies when you're producing a code. If you do anything, there's another bit of advice for Graham. Team structure is important to make sure that the people that are going to be paying for this stuff are in the same department of the people that are going to benefit from when you put a street tree or sustainable drainage in. Have a developers forum. That's worked pretty well in lots of places that we've seen. Talk to your developers, often. They do actually want to build nice things most of the time. Ordinary places can be beautiful. Use normal materials, but put them together beautifully. I really liked that point. I think from Lewis, lay natural stone steps and slabs on non-rigid beds. So using this flexible bed, which we're all going to be Googling a lot after this webinar. And you need a political mandate. We've heard that from Paris, and I'm sure all of you have worked where you've had very strong political mandates, and it really helps. We certainly have. And then when combine your public works in one to prevent sort of constant roadworks and then just erosion of sort of faith and trust from the public. Beautiful things can be cheaper. Was it 27% cheaper in Lincolnshire versus the sort of traditional methods? And even more so possibly if you look across, building more densely and getting more value from things other than just drainage as well. And finally, the simple task we set ourselves of amending the Highways Act, giving due regard to government guidance and elevating money for streets to statutory guidance. That's the final bit I have. Right, I think I'm going to hand over to Nicholas to say thank you again, but obviously thank you from me and thank you to our speakers and for those of you that have stuck with us.
Thank you very much indeed. There are seconds to go. Like a good street, we started on the sideways, we then moved into the main boulevard. We had a quick sort of Parisian diversion, if that's the right word, marvelous work in Paris, and then back via Lincolnshire and elsewhere. So thank you all for sticking with us. We've got another webinar coming up, date coming up very soon, which will be about the restitching and the regenerative development and re-centralisation of left behind towns in the Midlands and in the North and elsewhere. So watch out for that soon. We've also got our early bird discount for the Crate Street Summer School is literally about to end at the end of this month. So if you already got any junior planners or architects in your team who'd like to learn more about urban design, about architecture, that gets great feedback. It just leaves to me to say thank you all for giving us your lunch break. Thank you to David for chairing. Thank you to Lauren and Constance for making it actually happen and for taking the slight risk when the Zoom wasn't quite working at the beginning. Thank you for fixing that. And of course, thank you to our speakers. That's it. Back to the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.